challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's another beautiful day, the dawn of a new week and a new opportunity. Every day is just like a new opportunity, and another one has presented itself for us to discuss issues related to business, finance, and the economy. This is Early Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. As you know, that Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. We are still in that business, and that's our obligation on this program. Today, we'll be looking at the controversial U.S. spending bill. That's the bill to the tune of $460 billion. The controversy trailing that bill and the decision by the U.S. Senate to pass that bill. And eventually, the decision by Joe Biden to also sign it into law. That will be the thrust of our conversation today. Don't forget, you can be part of this conversation. All you just have to do is to go on our social media platform, on our YouTube page, to get the best of value and also lend your voice to the conversation. And now, let's kick off the program by taking news update, and that will come shortly after this break. Stay with us.
My name is Veronica Nkechi Eze.
Charles Abana. My name is Professor Martins Emeje.
Professor Sylvester Odion Akaine.
Keep watching Souq
News TV.
The best news channel online.
It's elevating, it's enlightening, it's educating.
Muhammad Ali found this truth in Africa. Rumble in the jungle. I swear the king is humble. Jesse Jackson, O.J. Simpson, this is black history. Andrew Young visit Africa in the late 60s. Legend, Bob Marley make the life different. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are big names. They fought for black Americans in the old days. We need the same revolution in our own ways. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Mr. Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre and Eddie Murphy. American prosperity ain't complete with African poverty. It's legendary Idris Abdul Karim, and you are on to Souq News. You don't touch that dial.
Tafawa Balewa Square, TBS. Tafawa Balewa Square was initially used as a horsing ground called Lagos Race Course. The edifice was constructed by General Yakubu Gowon in 1972 and named after Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa. Tafawa Balewa Square is located at 45/57 Marse Bangboshe Street on Lagos Island, Lagos, and referred to as TBS. TBS is a 50,000-seater capacity venue and houses the Remembrance Arcade, the 26-story Independence House, which at a time was the country's tallest building. When Lagos served as the country's seat of government, the National Assembly Complex was within the TBS. Also in the square are the National Broadcasting Commission Office, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Office, shopping centers, travel agencies, restaurants, car parking lots, and a bus terminal. Tafawa Balewa Square is adorned with beautiful statues of white horses and red eagles, symbols of strength and dignity. Our historic neighbors include the King's College and the Holy Cross Cathedral. Tafawa Balewa Square hosted some of the country's memorable events, such as the Independence Day in 1960, when Nigeria gained independence from Britain, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is celebrated annually on January 15. The edifice is a national cultural asset. Tafawa Balewa Square, Souq Enlightenment.
My name is Veronica Eze.
Charles Abana. My name is Professor Martins Emeje.
Professor Sylvester Odion Akaine.
Keep
watching Souq
News TV,
the best news channel online.
It's elevating, it's enlightening, it's educating.
Muhammad Ali found this route in Africa, rumble in the jungle. I swear the king is humble. Jesse Jackson, O.J. Simpson, this is black history. Andrew Young visit Africa in the late 60s. Legend, Bob Marley make the life different. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are big names. They fought for black Americans in the old days. We need same revolution in our own ways. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Mr. Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre and Eddie Murphy. American prosperity ain't complete with African poverty. It's legendary Idris Abdul Karim, and you are on to Souq News. You don't touch that dial.
Good morning, Femi and Blessing, and hello, welcome to the news update on Souq News. I am Lavina Emma. Following widespread reactions from private sector groups, the federal government has suspended the implementation of the Expatriate Employment Levy. The decision, which was announced by the Interior Ministry, also garnered support from the Nigerian Association of Chambers, Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA. According to the government, the resolution also included pausing the implementation of the levy for further consultations, forming a joint committee to review the EEL policy, and deferring the rollout of the levy as initially proposed. Additionally, a human rights organization has also expressed concerns about the significant increase in expatriate levies, prompting them to write an appeal to the president. In response to the suspension, analysts at KPMG described it as a welcome development, indicating that the government was responsive to stakeholders' concerns and emphasizing the importance of positive dialogue before revisiting the implementation of EEL to protect Nigeria's interests and foster economic growth. Moving on, the Naira has depreciated by 4.9% last week, reaching 1,627 Naira against the dollar. Despite the increased external reserves, which rose to $34.11 billion as of March 7, 2024, from $33.016 billion on January 2, 2024, marking a 2.83% year-to-date accretion. At the Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market, NAFEM, the Naira further declined, widening the gap between it and the parallel market. Street sales closed at 1,600 Naira to the dollar, while NAFEM trades ranged between 1,400 and 1,652 Naira in the forwards. In the forwards market, rates declined by 1.2% to 1,600 Naira for 1 month and 2.1% to 1,841 Naira for 1 year. Despite challenges, analysts anticipate the Naira to trade within similar bands across forex segments, supported by regulatory measures and increased foreign exchange inflows. Away from Nigeria, Libya's central bank governor, Sadiq Kabir, has urged parliament to endorse a new unified government and national budget amidst prolonged spending under the government of national unity. International diplomacy aimed at resolving the Libyan conflict has concentrated on advocating parliamentary and presidential elections to replace interim political bodies such as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the head of High State Council, HSC, and the government of national unity. Despite widespread calls for elections from major political factions, skepticism among many Libyans persists. regarding their sincerity in pursuing a vote that could potentially displace them from power. Since the NATO-backed uprising in 2011, Libya has experienced ongoing challenges, culminating in a split between Eastern and Western factions in 2014, each governing its respective area. And now, Egypt's finance minister, Mohamed Mate, has announced significant strides towards lowering the country's budget deficit, including the sale of real estate assets and securing a support package with the International Monetary Fund, IMF. He noted that Egypt's primary budget surplus is projected to surpass 3.5% in the upcoming fiscal year, starting in July, excluding interest payments, which have historically contributed to Egypt's fiscal shortfall. The Finance Ministry anticipates a primary general budget surplus equivalent to 2.5% of the GDP for the current fiscal year. Egypt recently finalized a deal to sell development rights to Ras Al Khaimah, a prime Mediterranean resort, to Abu Dhabi for $24 billion and expects over $20 billion from the IMF-led package, which also includes $3 billion in funding from the World Bank. Despite challenges such as declining Suez Canal revenue and increased expenditure due to currency devaluation and higher interest rates, Egypt remains committed to budget tightening measures and aims to keep its debt below 90% of GDP through continued asset sales and fiscal discipline. Finally, Chinese Ambassador Xiao Qian says China's investigation into tariffs on Australian wine is on the right track, though he refrained from confirming the Australian government's assertion that the dispute will be settled this month. Australian Trade Minister had stated a day earlier that China would conclude its review of the years-long wine tariff by the end of March. The tensions stem from China's imposition of various tariffs on Australian exports, including coal and lobsters, starting in 2020, amid deteriorating relations between the two nations over issues like Australia's call for inquiry into the origins of COVID-19 pandemic. While Australia lodged complaints with the World Trade Organization over China's actions, it agreed to suspend the disputes after China lifted the tariffs. But the standoff regarding the wine tariff, some as high as 218%, remains unresolved. And that's our package on news updates. Stay tuned to Early Exchange with Femi and Blessing. I am Lavina Emma. Do have a productive day.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development with our conversation. Today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, thank you, Lovina, for the news update, taking us around the globe, talking about the latest development. And now let's kick off our business of shaping policy, and that's going to start from the U.S., where we'll be looking at the spending bill. That's the $460 billion that was passed by the U.S. Senate on Friday. Interestingly, on Saturday, the President, Joe Biden, decided to sign the bill. What are the details of the spending bills, and what will be the outcome for those who are concerned and all the federal agencies that are in picture? We're being joined by Sam Oruwuje, who is going to provide more perspective to this. He joins us in the studio. Sam, glad to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Blessing. Thank you.
All right. Before we go to the details of the spending bills, which what we call appropriation bill here, let me have you react to the drama that preceded the passage of this bill. You know, the divided House and the debate in the House or in the Congress that happened before the passage of this bill on Friday, and eventually the decision by the President Biden to sign this bill on Saturday. So let me have your take on the controversies that preceded the passage of the bill first.
Thank you very much indeed, Femi. I think one of the major issues in parliamentary procedure is that there are debates here and there. The Republican in particular have been, since October last year, which the fiscal year started with, which is going to end September this year, has been involved in trying to see how they can cut the bill in some area. But the problem within the Republican Party has slowed down some of the procedure. But by and large, if that decision was not made on Friday, there would have been a problem in the U.S. because over 10 to 11 federal agencies and state departments were involved, and they quickly made that decision, and overwhelmingly they voted in favor so that they don't see the country get into a problem. But then, those are part of the parliamentary procedure, but what is important is that finally that thing was signed into law on Saturday to save those federal governments and departments of not having money to spend. That would have been a major issue, but we knew that at the end of the day they will come to reason, and they will leave their partisan nature to sign what is the common interest of the United States of America.
So this partisan nature that has lingered for quite a while, the spending bills or the funding bills for which they are still dragging should have been done as far back as October, but they've been dragging and just making temporary arrangements. What is the issue? One would think that for a country like US, regardless of the disagreement or the division across different parties, it wouldn't drag to an extent like this?
No, I think that is the beauty of parliamentary proceeding. Even though it drags so long, we knew at the end of the day that before the timelines expire, something will have been done. But like I said earlier, there's been a high debate from the Republican Party to see how they can make some cut on the bills. But that notwithstanding, they were able to come together, particularly in the upper house, which eventually made that decision on Friday, and by Saturday, everything was. But there are some other departments whose consideration has not been met. But in due course, I'm sure that those decisions will be made so that everything will be, because by September, the fiscal year will have ended like what started in October. But I think is okay. What it is the beauty of democracy is that compromises will have to be made at some point, and those compromises were made on Friday, where that bipartisan nature was brought to bear, and things finally took shape.
Is a forthcoming U.S. election any feel to this? Is this a particular situation?
Well, I don't think so personally. There may be some inner workings that have led to that, but in the public domain, I don't see any relationship. I just think that the issue between the Democrats and the Republican within the House and that of the Senate has been ongoing for a while, but I don't think it's essentially about the U.S. election, in my view.
There are some senators who argue that the U.S. Senate didn't have enough time to scrutinize this bill. Unlike the House of Reps, you know, they passed their version last year. And then knowing fully well that the president, a day after, had to sign this bill. Do you think this was done in a hurry just to avert the shutdown?
Yes, on one breath, yes, it was done in a hurry so that the system does not collapse. But on the other hand, if the Senate from October till early March had not had an opportunity to scrutinize the bill, then it's rather unfortunate, because the Senate Committee on Appropriation was supposed to have looked at those figures carefully. So I think I will see it from the point of view of political brinksmanship for those senators to save their face towards the end for the job that they ought to have done in the last 4 months or thereabout.
Let's look at the 6 bills that were considered and made provision for. We have bills like agriculture, transportation, veteran affairs, and school cafeteria, housing, and those like. So, having selected like the most important of them, or the ones with pressing needs, how soon do you think the others will be given attention?
The others will come quickly, because defense has not been considered. You have those critical ones like Food and Drug Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency aligns with the other ministry that you just spoke about. Transportation is critical to this sector. But I do know that within the shortest possible time, maybe before 23rd of March, that will come to full conclusion. But those critical ones that are so important to the life wire of the economy were those ones that they quickly put on the table, and they had to pass that. But in spite of the challenge with the Republican in terms of how to cut down on some of those bills, I'm sure by 22nd, 23rd of March, the whole subject matter will have been dealt with appropriately.
Now, let's look at the voting pattern, you know, the pattern of the vote on Friday. You have 75 against 22. 75 went for the bill, supported the bill. 22 went against it. What does that suggest to you about
That's overwhelming. I think that was done in the national interest. That speaks to the national interest. That in spite of the differences between the core conservative in the House and some other Republican, even within the Republican Party, they have some issue that means national interest override every partisan interest. That's what that speaks to, in my view.
Now, looking at the division, what could you say is the the stand of either party over these bills?
With the pattern of vote on Friday, it shows that the national interest supersedes those other wranglings, particularly from the two political parties that are playing out in the House. So I think in a simple term, that's what it just shows.
Is it about a thing of, what is allocated to a particular ministry or area being too much or not necessary? What could be the thrust of the disagreement? What do you suspect is?
No, I think Republican, from the beginning of October when the bill was laid before the Congress, they've been clamoring to make some cuts in terms of spending of a particular ministry. And that, even though they made some demands which were far-reaching for some Republicans, but by and large, they couldn't get through with some of those cuts that they intended. I think that's what drags on for a while. So that idea that some of these bills from some of those agencies and Department of Government, they could make some savings so that they can apply that to some other sector within the U.S. economy. But by and large, that didn't get through, and they have no other option in the interest of the country than to sign that bill.
Now, let's look at the set of people that will be directly affected by this bill. You have the farmers, the veterans, the firefighters. Now that the bill is being passed, what will be the implication for this set of people?
For the firefighter, there's an ongoing demand to increase their wages and salaries. So with this bill coming through, there will be increase in wages and salaries, particularly for the firefighter. It's one of those elements that was brought before the Congress last year. So it will be Uhuru. Veterans are people that have served the country and they are in retirement. So this is a good news for them, and they will continue to get what they deserve. But for the firefighters in particular, they've been crying for wage increments. So with this bill signed into law, those proposals will now be put on the table, and people will receive what is due to them.
What about the farmers?
Everybody will get their fair deal since those things have been signed into law. So all those packages that take care of everybody within those bills will now be brought to the table, and everybody will be happy at the end of the day.
All right, let's look at some of the ministries that we're taking care of, or some items in the package that we're taking care of. What is the lesson to learn? For instance, one of them is school cafeterias. It became important to them that regardless of disagreement, some funding had to go there. What can other countries, particularly African countries, learn from that?
It simply means that you have to take the national interest above every other interest. And once an interest can serve the citizen to a very large extent, those ideas must be pursued to their logical conclusion. I think that's the lesson that African government, when they talk about social intervention that benefit the citizens directly, they should focus on that and look away from their partisan nature to see what benefit the common man on the street.
Now, looking at the drama in the U.S. Congress and then the controversy, don't you think with this kind of development is going to cause distortion when it comes to the fiscal year? You know, do you foresee any distortion?
I don't think so, since that has been signed on Saturday, and hopefully by 22nd of March, the other outstanding things we go through, and the fiscal year starts from October to September. So September is still a long way from now. I don't think there will be major distortion on the economy. And I think those in the Congress will take cognizance of the implication of not putting things in place on time.
Now, are there certain businesses that might be impacted as a result of this release of funds in tranches? Are there certain developments that may be impacted?
There are always windows for spending, even when the bill has not been passed into law. So in such respect, I don't think there will be so much impact. There will be a few impact here and there, but the system will have a way of balancing itself out in terms of the gaps that existed as a result of the ongoing issue within the Congress.
Now, the budget allocations for these agencies ought to have expired March 1st, but, you know, due to this drama, it was extended by a week for them to be able to have this debate and then pass it through. What are the lessons here?
I think the lesson is that even where there are challenges within the system, there are mechanisms that are put in place to find a way to resolve those crises. Even when that is supposed to have taken effect from March, there were some provisions, and I'm sure within their constitutional framework, those provisions are there. And like in our climb as well, we have that kind of provisions within the Constitution that take care of such gaps that may exist from time to time, occasioning from some of the issues at the parliamentary proceeding.
Now, for the others, the other packages, they have till March 22 to attend to them. And then today's March 11, so just like 11 more days to attend to that. Isn't this fire brigade approach? And what does it say about the U.S.?
No, there's nothing uniquely different because people are involved, and once people are involved, there are disagreements. And one of the beauty of democracy is to reach compromise. And once there are differences, once compromise are reached, then the system will take care of itself. I don't think there's anything really unusual, particularly where people differ on a policy framework on how certain issues should run within the U.S. And at the end of the day, once compromises are reached between the various parties, then the issues will be resolved. I don't think something untoward has happened. So I think it will improve on the parliamentary proceeding, in my view, where people can differ and reach compromises and the national interest supersede every other interest.
All right, it's time for us to go on another break. We'll be right back shortly to discuss more on the U.S. spending bills. Stay with us.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
I'm okay.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you are on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it, because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News, who had the courage to transcend a locked off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.
My name is Olatunji Shoti Miri. I'm a performing artist, and television radio presenter and a university lecturer, Unilag. Keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Black, Africa's finest music comedian, and you're watching Souq News. If you're not watching Souq News, I pity you, but keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Timida Kolo, and you're watching Souq News. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Wisdom Oluwaseun Okoko, co-founder Orbit Africa Properties. I'm live at Souq News. Guys, keep watching Souq News. For everything that concerns business, economy, politics, news, Souq News is your station.
Individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, indeed, we're still in the business of shaping policy and advancing development with our conversation, and we're still looking at the US $460 billion spending bill. And Sam is still here with us to provide more perspective. Glad to know you're still here with us.
Thank you.
All right, now let's look at President Joe Biden's administration and the way he's handling the economy. You know, when it comes to election year, the issue of the economy is always very crucial. How will you assess the economy under the administration of Joe Biden? And in recent times, how will you describe some of his economic policies and impact?
I think in terms of job creation, the Joe Biden administration has done remarkably well. In spite of the great opposition in some respect from the Republican Party. Beyond his age, which has become a major challenge in some of the issues that are being currently debated in the US. But I think he has not done too badly in the last 4 years or thereabout. But then the challenge is whether the citizens will come back to vote for him remain to be seen as we move closer to the election period in the US.
All right, talking about job creation in the U.S. totaled about 275,000 in February, but the unemployment rate has also risen to about 3.9%. What do you think could be the reason, and what needs to be done to match up the job created with the unemployment rate?
I think what they estimated, they've not gotten to the figures that they estimated. So that is understandable, so based on estimate. But by and large, when you look at the non-farm employment figure that has jumped up at the end of February, it looks remarkable. Even the government agencies themselves, restaurants and some other businesses has brought about that spike in terms of the job creation. But the rate of unemployment rising to about 3.9%, look a major challenge for the administration. And based on the forecast, I'm sure within the next 1 month, more jobs will be created, and that rise will be reduced to a very large extent.
Now let's go to the details of the job creation according to statistics provided by the Labor Bureau of Statistics. It says healthcare led with 67,000 new jobs. Government again was a big contributor with 52,000, while restaurants and bars added 42,000. What do you make of this statistics? Starting with healthcare, 67,000, the one created by the government, 52,000. Restaurants and bar, 42,000. I want you to look at the pattern. There's a part being played by the government, a part being played by the private sector, you understand? So what do you make of these statistics?
I think the private sector have led that pack. Government provided about 52,000 jobs, and that of the healthcare, which
67,000.
Yeah, which is a critical sector of the economy, and the value chain in terms of health sector delivery is large. So that's account for the figure. Then in terms of restaurant business, quick serve and the bar and butcheries also have a hike. So what that shows is that the dominant job creator within any economy is the private sector. So even though the government created some of those jobs, the informal sector and the private sector are the most critical sector that help to create jobs for the citizens. So they have trends in terms of the statistics like you just rolled out from the Department of Labor. And there's a Labor Bureau statistic that take care of those figures. So, and those projections is that some more jobs will be created in no distant time, and that 3.9 unemployment figure that jumped a little up from 3.2 or 3.7% as of January will reduce drastically.
I still find that figure, quite interesting. Restaurants and bars providing 42,000 jobs. What does that suggest about that sector in the U.S.?
That's a sector that is tied to the tourism industry. So, and most Americans are dependent on quick serve stores, what you call restaurants. So there's a improvement in that sector in terms of service that they provide in that sector. So normally they will create more job in that sector because it's tied to some other industry.
And perhaps their services are in high demand because they are necessities.
Of course, basic.
So the purpose of people getting job is to earn a living, but hourly earnings was watched closely over the month because of inflation. So wages only grew by 0.1%. Do you think that is enough, even though they're watching inflation? Should it be increased more than that? So those who are working, earning, should have more disposable income.
There are speculations that that 0.1% to a very large extent will not be able to control inflation, and there's a likelihood that the Federal Reserve Bank is likely to cut the rate sometime in the nearest future, and I think they are meeting sometime next week, and let's see what happens with that. So I don't think, by and large, those figures are a very bad figure. If you look at the projections that they've made, there's been a remarkable increase in terms of the trajectory which the forecasts made for the country.
Now, what do you make of the pattern as regards unemployment rate and job creation in the U.S.? If you look at the figure for January and that of February, what are your deductions?
There's been an improvement month on month. So to that extent, I'm sure that at the end of March, more jobs were created, and the figure that we're considering today, maybe if we have the opportunity to speak on those issues again, we'll be looking at another figure. And I recall maybe sometime last week, we were talking about the U.S. economy. The projection that we had was slightly lower than what we currently have as of today. So that means that more opportunities will come, particularly now that the bills has been signed into law, and that will energize the economy to a very large extent, and more jobs will be created.
So the 275,000 jobs that were created actually are non-farm jobs. Now, compared to maybe Africa or a country like Nigeria, where there is advocacy for people to return to the farms, to embrace agriculture, but you have 275 jobs that are not linked to farming. Is the U.S. so food sufficient, Or is the farming, the agricultural sector a street sector that people don't easily get into? What's your take on this?
No, they get into the agri sector, the farm sector, or maybe for just this particular period of time, the jobs that were created were particularly non-farm sector. That means it's not to say that the farming sector do not require employment.
But it's sorry to cut in, but it's ordinarily maybe looking from the needs of African countries. It seems like when employment wants to be, when the government wants to create employment, the agriculture sector is like the easiest to just bring in people, and then you also increase food production. But this seems to be like the reverse. No,
but for me, in terms of government engaging people in the farm is speculative in terms of creating jobs. The clamor is that people should go back to farm so that we can increase on our food security. But on the other hand, the agri sector is more mechanized. The value chain in terms of farming is well entrenched, and so a lot of people are already employed in that area. But this particular point in time, the jobs that were made available are non-farm sector. That's not to undermine that that sector does not create job opportunity. It's just the figure that we currently have. But here, how many people do government really encourage to go into farm, even when they are not supporting in terms of extension services, providing mechanized instruments for people to farm, so that the opportunities that are bound in that sector will increase maximally.
Now, let's look at the U.S. situation and compare it to that of Africa, or extension Nigeria. You have job reports being released in January, and then you know the number of jobs being created by the government, the private sector, and even the sectors that are affected. Now in February, the same figures are being released. In our climate, do we have this kind of statistics, this kind of pattern, whereby it informs the citizens or citizenry of job creation, the statistics every month? I'm not saying quarterly now, but this is monthly. It's monthly. It's a monthly approach to release of the statistics.
Yeah,
what lesson would that be for Africa and other?
I think the challenge here is how do we collect data? How do we deploy data? Beyond the Bureau of Statistics, these various ministries, like labor in particular in the US, has its own statistics in terms of collating figures when it comes to employment and unemployment. So the lesson for us, or the takeaway, is that the departments of government in Africa must find a way to create efficient data collection mechanism that will ensure data accuracy, and that the data that they actually get to the feed is what is reported. So the lesson for us is that various departments, even while the National Bureau of Statistics is there, as an omnibus government agency that deals with the data analysis and data collection. But then each department should be able to have evidence-based data collection mechanism that people can say these data are trusted, they are reliable, and they are valid, so that when you push out certain elements into the public domain, we can trust those data. But as we speak, our data management ecosystem is faulty, so we need to recalibrate it, re-engineer it, so that we can really get actual data.
Now, talking about data, it looks like this data is going to be subject to quick change, as the job creation was skewed towards part-time jobs. So does it look like over some time, those people who had the part-time jobs may be changing jobs or may be relieved and will also be in the unemployment side?
No, the pattern is that they are looking at the aggregate in terms of labor demand. What it means is that some people must of necessity, and some industry are configured based on part-time job basis. Maybe when they leave those kind of jobs, maybe they equally have other jobs that are driven by part-time basis. So those statistics are there in terms of whether it's a full-time job, whether it's a part-time job, whether it's an hourly-based job. Those statistics speak to those specific jobs, and those ecosystem support various kind of job. Even when you have some basic job, and when you finish on a job and you have an opportunity for a part-time job, you can still get that job. And those who are captured within the statistics of employment, unemployment, underemployment. So I think it's just a natural ways of taking care of the system.
But the statistics also show that full-time jobs declined by 187,000, while part-time jobs increased by 51,000 jobs. Does that suggest some layoff?
Yes, to some extent, maybe there will be no continuity of some of those jobs, but some, maybe depending on the arrangement of what people make, there are people who actually opt to work on part-time basis rather than full-time jobs. So the scenario varies from one state to the other within the US. So, so that we don't really have the full data beyond the aggregate that we have. So it might be difficult to speak to that issue unless we really have specific industry that are part-time based, the full-time job that decline in the period under review. So I think, but we have access to the real data, we'll be able to see how, to what extent, what balancing act does those who are on part-time and those who left the job. But what is important is that jobs are created from time to time, whether they are full-time, whether they are part-time basis.
But what do you think is influencing this job cut? You know, you have layoffs happening, you know, even tech companies were being affected in the US. What do you think is informing or is influencing this kind of pattern?
Once companies are not able to operate optimally in terms of their own projections, they may not have any other option to disengage some of the workers. So most important thing is that most companies go into business to make profit after creating those activities. And if some of those jobs cannot impact their bottom line, then they may have to disengage some people. And sometimes when people are disengaged, they are reskilled to go into other sector to work in those clients.
All right, so going forward, what can be done to increase the jobs available, particularly full-time jobs, which ensure job security?
Well, that has to do with the economy. If the economy rebounds fully, then you're able to create more jobs, then people will have full job. But if the economy is struggling or businesses are struggling, it might be very difficult to sustain full-time job. So you need to reflect the economy, and I'm sure that with signing bill into law, some of those critical sectors of the economy will find a way to absorb more people into various departments and agencies of government. And those who provide ancillary services to those departments will be able to recall some of the people they have been disengaged.
Now let's bring the conversation home and look at our climb here. In Nigeria, the highest employer of labor, that's the government. You know, if you look at the pattern in the US between the private sector and the government, almost at par with these statistics. What does that suggest to you about the capacity of the private sector in Nigeria and the need for them to, you know, up their game? Should we just maintain that pattern where government remains the highest employer of labor, or you think the private sector can increase that figure?
I have a feeling that of the view that the government is the highest employer of labor.
And would that remain so?
No, I have my reservation whether that that statistic is real. We're over 200 million people, and if you put the public service and the civil service, local government, state to federal, and look at the total number of the workforce, I'm not too sure that the government is the highest employer of labor, in my view. I think that the informal sector is the highest employer of labor, and that speaks to the earlier conversation that we had. When you talk about statistics, real statistics, in terms of who is employing who, which sector is even the greater contributor beyond looking at the aggregate contribution, then I'm sure that claim that the government is the highest employer of labor, I doubt that. If we put the total number of the public service agencies and department of government and look at the informal sector and look at businesses, I'm sure that the informal sector is a major employer. But I don't have my hand on the statistics, but my hunch tells me that the government cannot be the greater employer of labor in Nigeria.
Anyway, let's leave that debate for another day. But the conversation here is, let's look at the impact of the private sector here compared to that of the government. Now, in terms of statistics, like you said, which is a huge challenge. Now, how do we improve on that, providing the right statistics? You have the Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria who are to provide this. When it comes to the economy, that of inflation, some other statistics, you get them monthly. Can they adopt same approach to job creation? And then if you need to look at that of the private sector, how do you source for that kind of data? That of government could be easier because some of these agencies could be approached for their data in terms of job creation. But for the private sector, how would this be approached?
The private sector does not operate in isolation. So they have some basic statistics. I think the challenge here is the way we deal with data, the way we collect data, and the way we use data. So in a matter of speaking, the local government should come up with that responsibility of finding a way to capture data. States should capture data. Departments and agencies should capture those data before they aggregate them to the National Bureau of Statistics that has the core responsibility or mandate to collect those data. But sometimes the data are there, but I think to a very large extent, we're a bit reticent when it comes to the use of data in our client. So the data are there. You have a payee system from the private sector that submits data in terms of those who are on the payroll to state government that has the responsibility to collect the payee tax. You have other kinds of taxation. You have the local government collecting rates on wheelbarrows, wine, sellers in the local government. You have shops, receipts and all that. So the data are there. But to what extent can we calibrate this data and become useful? And each department of government rely on this data for planning purposes.
All right, talking about what to adopt here, if you look at the sector standpoint of the jobs created, you find that the health sector led by about 67,000, bringing it home now to Nigeria, where we've had issues of brain drain and the complaint from medical practitioners of you having about one doctor to more than 1,000 patients. What should be copied here?
I think what the government should do is particularly the health sector, which is very critical to all other sector, massive investment, the payment and the working condition of the medical personnel must be improved upon. So those clients where they are able to pay higher salaries and wages, we should find a way to get the brain gain by putting all the necessary mechanism in place so that people don't go elsewhere where they are more valued and they get more emolument in terms of what they pay at the end of the day. So government has a critical responsibility in terms of finding the environment, first and foremost, suitable, providing the right equipment for the medical personnel, then find a way to improve on the entire health sector policy so that we can get more people in that sector.
Thank you very much, Sam Uruji, Director, Center for Public Policy, for staying with us on the show today. I wouldn't want to say, being the in-house analyst, you're more or less a part and parcel of Early Exchange. So thank you for being with us on this first segment of the show.
Thank you very much indeed. Blessing.
We'll take a quick break and return to look at something else. Early Exchange continues after this time.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This early exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the early exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development. Lateef Jakande. Born Lateef Kayode Jakande in the Ekpetedo area of Lagos Island, Lagos State on July 1929. He studied at the Lagos Public School at Enowa, Lagos Island, then at Bonham Memorial Methodist School, Port Harcourt, King's College, enrolled at Ilesha Grammar School, where he edited a literary paper called The Quarterly Mirror. Jakande began a career in journalism in 1949 with a daily service and joined the Nigerian Tribune in 1953. The owner, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, appointed Jakande editor-in-chief of the Tribune in 1956. Jakande established John West Publications in 1975 after leaving Tribune and began to publish the Lagos News. He served as the first president of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, NPAN. Jakande ran for election as executive governor of Lagos State in 1979 on the Unity Party of Nigeria platform. His administration was effective and open and implemented the cardinal policies of his party. He introduced housing and educational programs targeting the poor, building new neighborhood primary and secondary schools, and providing free primary and secondary education. He gave poor people's children education, and many of them are now very prominent in the society today. Jakande established the Lagos State University and constructed over 30,000 housing units. After the military takeover in 1983, Jakande was charged, prosecuted, and convicted of treason and later pardoned. He served as Minister of Works under the Sani Abacha military regime. He died in Lagos on February 11, 2021. Lateef Jakande was the first civilian governor of Lagos State. Lateef Kayode Jakande, Souq Enlightenment.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This early exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the early exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find
Conversation looking at the latest development in the U.S., where we talked about the spending bill and the development that and the aftermath. And now let's come back home, where we talk about Nigeria and some of the economic policies. There's a report suggesting that the policies being embarked on by President Bola Tinubu, especially the economic policies, are paying off, with the returns and the statistics being released in February. How do we establish this, and what will be the impact of this? Is suggesting that the foreign portfolio investment exceeded $1 billion in February. To provide proper perspective, we're being joined by Oji Chigozie Udumeze, who is the Managing Consultant, CEO of Flame Academy and Consulting Limited. Glad you have joined us on LXM this morning.
Yeah, good morning, my very good friend. When you bring the gap between the official foreign exchange rate and the parallel market rate, it may hurt the economy temporarily in terms of the kind of inflationary trend we're seeing right now. But when you close that gap, a multiple positive, outcome will happen. For example, the propensity, to round trip, that is, those who have access to this dollar through their connections in government or central bank and so on, buying the dollar at a lower rate from government, and coming back to a round trip to sell it off again to people who actually need the money for transactions in the parallel market. That the incentive to do that, the propensity to do that will drop. All right? Once the gap is closed, and that will mean that those who have opportunity to send money to Nigeria, for example, diasporans who are living in America, UK, China, all kinds of places, will no longer be scared to send dollars to Nigeria, because usually under that huge gap, when they send their money, government, as we've been doing in the past, will collect their money at the official rate. Let's say official rate is 800 and the parallel market rate is 1,000. Somebody sending money from the US will send the money to the family and will be paid at 800. But when they go to buy things in the market, they are buying at 1,000. So it's a major disincentive for other foreign exchange inflow. So now the government has tried to close that gap. We expect, naturally, that inflows from other sources like diaspora inflow and other people who want to move their money into Nigeria will increase, because there's no more injustice in the exchange rate that they send their money with. That's one. Then two again, a few days ago, or about 2 weeks ago, the central bank's monetary policy committee also met, and in their continued push to fight inflation, even though I have my personal opinion against the hike in interest rates. I mentioned that with you on the day the MPC came out with their announcements. I'd expected a slight raise in the MPR, that's monetary policy rate. That's the anchor interest rate in Nigeria. I'd expected that rate to move up a little, but what we saw was a 400 basis point jack in that rate. All right? Even though we agree that such rate increases are to help, curtail inflation, but when rates are raised up, investors and people who have cash will tend to want to invest more of their funds than spend it. Because more spending, that is when more money is pursuing few goods, is what will naturally term inflation. So it's assumed that by jacking rates up, people will tend to invest more than consume. But that's, again, theoretical in economics, when you talk about demand pull inflation. But Nigeria's inflation is clearly not demand pull. Let me leave that for now. So by increasing rates, you expect that investment instruments will, give higher yield. That is, for example, people that want to buy commercial papers, bankers' acceptances, even fixed deposit in banks, investing in central banks' treasury bills. The rates will naturally go up. And that will mean that those who want to have a higher yield, higher rate of return on their investment will look in Nigeria's direction. Particularly people you call foreign portfolio investors. What does this mean for the ordinary Nigerian who may be listening to us? Foreign portfolio investors are investors who carry their money almost like in a portfolio, in a suitcase, looking for where they can get a higher interest rate instrument to invest on a short-term basis, by the way. And that's why we don't have to hype this outcome until it becomes regular, consistent, and lasting for a while. So foreign portfolio investors want to come into your country and invest in your market instruments. For example, I've mentioned commercial papers, treasury bills, that's the open market operation, and so on. What does this mean? If they are coming in with their dollar to take advantage of this increase in interest rates, what it means is that Nigeria will have more inflow of foreign exchange, helping to douse the tension on the naira against the dollar. So it's a positive thing. But remember, we call them foreign portfolio investors. That means their money is not meant to stay in the economy on a long-term basis. Those who invest on a long-term basis are those we know as foreign direct investors. They come in to bring in equipment, employ labor, invest on a long-term basis in companies, either new companies or existing companies. But these portfolio investors, they are good to give you FX liquidity. But note again that because they are looking for short-term gains, they may soon be requiring to raise dollar back to transfer their money back to their home country. That may also put pressure on your local currency at the time they want to exit. It's only when the conditions are stable over time and then the FX rate gap is not changing again that you may see the foreign portfolio investors invest and reinvest, as in keep rolling over their investment, whereby the gain on your FX might be sustained. I don't know if this is clear enough. Thank you.
It is very clear. Now, what can be done to sustain foreign portfolio investors? You've mentioned that, yes, the interest rate is an incentive for them to come in. So the Nigerian economy would not want a situation where money is seen coming in and then things go well for a short while, only for it to revert after some time. What can sustain these investors? What conditions will sustain them?
Okay, one major factor that either makes the foreign portfolio investor stay in your economy or run away is the gap in exchange rate. Therefore, our dear central bank governor must insist and must consistently ensure that the foreign exchange rate, naira to dollar or dollar to naira rate in the official window must remain very close, or in fact, exactly the same as that rate in the streets. How do I mean? If a foreign investor is coming into your country with, say, $1 million, and is coming in today at the rate of, let's say, 1,600 naira, as it were, like on Friday. Okay, so he's coming in to get, $1 for 1,600 naira. So if he comes in with $1 million, he's going to get 1.6 billion naira. I hope that math is correct. So now, if the rate does not change, he hopes to put that 1.6 billion naira in our local investment instrument like Treasury bill, for example. Let's assume that Treasury bill offers a return of 20% to him. So 1.6 billion invested for 1 year will give him 20% interest. Let's say that is 320 million naira. Meaning that at the end of 1 year, that foreign portfolio investor would have increased their money from 1.6 billion naira to 1.92 billion naira. Correct? Fantastic return compared to what he will earn in America or UK or other developed economies where interest rates are below 5%, where he can't even talk about earning up to that. Now, if he has earned 1.9 billion naira, it is now time to return the money to his home country. Is the rate still 1,600 per dollar at that time? If it is, then his returns are real and he can move that money back, raising his shoulder that he has invested, he has beaten the global rate by investing in Nigeria, making so much money. But if, unfortunately, the rate at that time is no more 1,600, maybe the rate has depreciated. Naira has gone down, to let's say 2,000 Naira to $1 in 1 year's time. It means that that investor has, hurt himself by coming to Nigeria, because 1.6 billion grew his money to 1.92 billion in 1 year. But to send the money back to his country, he now needs 2 billion to convert back to $1 million when he's going back. So the 1.92 he has earned has unfortunately also meant a loss to him. I don't know if you understand this. So exchange rate changes can hurt the foreign portfolio investor, making their gain, nullified by exchange rate differences. So one major factor to sustain this, as you asked me, is that the central bank must ensure that the rate remains closed. If I thought there's any devaluation, it shouldn't be very much. Or, like the central bank had done before, through what we call the FX futures window, through the FMDQ. I don't know if you understand, the way that market platform works. The FMDQ, Financial Market Data Quotation Platform, where the foreign investors can be assured of some certainty in the interest, in the FX rate they will exit in next 1 year by being given some futures contracts, whereby the central bank will say, you're a foreign investor bringing $1 million today. We give you a future agreement that $1 million you're bringing today, when you need it back in the next 1 year, we will give it back to you at 1.6 or at 1,600 to $1, irrespective of the rate at that time you want to exit. That is future contract where we agree on the rate today for the next 1 year to assure you that you move your money back to your country at the same rate. That can assure them to bring. Again, we don't hope and we don't want to pray that interest rate remains very high. Otherwise, that's another factor that will keep the foreign investor. But this one is dependent on the level of inflation that the government is fighting. No one hopes to continue to have a very high interest rate, because as we speak, and as I mentioned to you in my last interview with you, a very huge jump in interest rate like we've seen during the last MPC means that local manufacturers and producers are going to be hurt in multiple ways. One, most producers in Nigeria import their input materials, chemicals, raw materials, and so on. So they are having very high cost of input materials as they manufacture in Nigeria. Two, they suffer very high cost of energy, in producing in Nigeria. And then three, they now have to borrow at stupendously high interest rates. Like I can tell you for free, that interest rates in most banks in Nigeria are now averaging over 30%. So it's a triple whammy. You're a local producer in Nigeria, you have to import raw materials at a very crazy FX rate as it is right now. Now, you have to pay very high cost of energy because NEPA or whatever we call them will not give you power. You have to fund and fuel your plant. You have to operate your plant by your own, and then you have to borrow at a very high rate compared to your competitors in China or US who have to borrow at 3-4%. So at the end of the day, the local manufacturer will produce goods at a very high price. Now, because we have tendency to prefer foreign goods, then it is always better that foreign goods are much more costlier than local ones, so the local producer can sell and make money and remain in business. But unfortunately now, foreign goods even come in even cheaper or almost the same price as local goods, making local manufacturers driving out the global market, of course, in a world that is now globalized. So this is not good for local production. This is not good for unemployment rate, because every time we import what we consume in this country, we are providing employment for foreigners while promoting unemployment in our local economy. That's a big issue the central bank must look at. And I've said here consistently, if we can be patient with our management of our FX, over time, it will help us manage our inflation other than hurting ourselves further by hiking benchmark interest rates, the cash reserve requirement rates, and the liquidity ratio, even though liquidity ratio has remained 30%, all right, but CRR jumping, by some hundreds of basis points, and MPR jumping too, is a very terrible thing for this economy. CRR at 45% is one of the craziest in the world, and I think central banks should meet again in the next MPC and do a review of that CRR. It's okay to manage MPR going up, But CRR is direct hurting of the banks and bank borrowers.
Now let's look at overseas remittances. According to figure provided by the CBN for the month of February, it has increased to $1.3 billion. Now, what do you make of this development? Because you said earlier that it's too early for Tinubu's administration to start celebrating. But what do you make of the statistics? And then how can the federal government sustain this overseas remittances, sustain this hike in overseas remittances?
Okay, like I said earlier, as long as that report is coming from central bank, we have to believe it. And it's a good thing for the economy. We're not doubting them. It's a good sign that the reasons why people don't want to bring in their money into Nigeria, those reasons are being addressed by the reform. You know, I have been a promoter of this kind of reform, even though it's all happening together at the same time with fuel subsidy removal, and therefore the hurt and the pain is almost like too much for Nigerians. But what I expect is that as long as there is sincerity of purpose and the important agencies of government like the central bank who are pushing this reform, they stay consistent. Like I said earlier, they ensure that at no time will the gap between the official and the parallel market rate, you know, begin to swell again. If they can do their best to keep these two rates equal, then this early sign of, you know, positive outcome will be sustained, and then at that point we can begin to celebrate. So the increase in February, you know, compared to even last year's figure that I learned was about $3.9 billion. So in 2 months, or 3 months, so to speak, you know, we have done 2.3 billion already. So if we are consistent, then we'll see this year's foreign exchange inflow more than tripling, you know, growing much more than 300 or 400% than last year's own, which is a great thing for this economy. So there is no doubt that this reform, if followed through consistently, will improve Nigeria's, you know, FX liquidity position, thereby reducing the pressure on the naira. So, and if we keep that going on, we find that naira will not, you know, jump so high again towards 2,000 naira to $1. Instead, we can be at this corridor of 1,600, and maybe over time see it drop to maybe as low as 1,350. I'm estimating, if we stay consistent, because the challenge with naira is, you know, lack of inflow of dollars. One thing again I expect the central bank to do is to also allow exporters the freedom, as it were before, to sell their money. I cannot go to the farm or to the you know, quarry or whatever I do. I suffer to bring goods in. I mean, out of the farm. I find, you know, a buyer in China or in America or in Britain. I find a buyer and I sell my commodity to him as an exporter, and they give me dollar or pounds. Then you force me to give it to you at a rate much, much lower than the parallel market rate. What does that, you know, encourage? Most exporters find a way to underreport their export or find other ways ensure that that money does not come back to Nigeria. They find a way to move that money around the world, round trip it, to stay away from submitting that money to the central bank. But if you give them the freedom to sell their money in a market where the rate is, you know, equivalent to the parallel market rate, or a market where the rates have closed up, you find that the underreporting, the hiding of that money, trying to send them away, will stop. And all the export transactions in Nigeria will fully reported, and all the dollars received will come into this country, because the people that own the dollar will get the value they believe is fair to them. It's unjust and unfair for somebody to go and suffer to produce export goods, export them, and then come back and submit the dollar, and the dollar is given to a lazy person, a corrupt person, at 800 naira to $1. he takes the sweat of the farmer at 800, and then he goes to the under market the same day and sells at 1,000 and makes 200 million naira on $1 million in a day for doing nothing. While the farmer is hurt by not being allowed to sell the dollar at 1,000. Instead, government collect it in the what you call the INM window then at 800. So now once the rates are closed up and held up together, what happens is that there will be an opening for more FX inflow from, hitherto closed avenues. All the international Nigerians in the diaspora will have no restraint anymore to send their money, knowing that the interest, the FX rate they get or their families get for those monies will be at a very competitive rate, a rate equal to what is obtainable in the economy. So all that will open up. Foreign direct investors will come in, even though the major issue we have with that is security. Look at Nigeria today again. We're talking about 200 and something young people, students being, abducted just a few days ago. That's a major issue for foreign direct investment in this country. So if we resolve security issues and close this gap between Naira and, official and unofficial rate, you find that Nigeria can only have heavy inflow of foreign investment, both portfolio investment and direct investment.
Before we go on a quick break, hasn't that already been addressed by the CBN when it gave a directive to the Bureau de Change operators upon resuming sales of Forex to them, that they're only permitted to sell Forex at a margin not more than, profit margin not more than 1%?
In today's globalized and seemingly free market, government has no reason. They have no reason to be trying to control prices. It is not done anywhere in the world. You can do a quasi-control using the money you have in your position. In fact, the quarrel with the BDC for me is very, very destructive and unnecessary. And any scheme they go into again to sell dollar to BDC at a concession rate is a crazy policy. Government should abandon all of those things. If we want to have 10,000 BDCs, we should go ahead. There's no point in removing their licenses. All this we're doing because we don't have the dollar to sell. In other countries, I travel around Africa in my training engagements. I've been in some key economies in Africa, including Kenya. Nobody struggles to curtail what the BDC people do. It's necessary. If the dollar is available in the streets, in the bank, what the bank gives you is something you get in the streets. There's no need for all of this noise. I actually foresee a situation in Nigeria where, banks can sell dollar to people as they walk into the bank, quite unlike today. People have to open 100 accounts to be able to get to $2,000 for maybe travel allowance and so on. It is not necessary. When supply of USD is available in the market, whether it's a parallel market or formal market, is available on equal measure at the same rate, all of these brigandage will stop. So let central bank focus on policies that will open up, foreign exchange inflow. That's all they need. Let the BDCs breathe and forget about any policy of selling dollar to them at a concessionary rate. That is fraudulent. That is corrupt. That's a corrupt practice. You want to trim them down and then get a few of them. You say you want to give them dollar at 1,300 naira to $1. That's crime. That's criminal. Allow them exist, any number they want to be, and let them get dollar at the normal rate. Everybody else can get it. Then you want to put 1 naira on top and sell. Once you close the gap and hold the gap down, you don't need to do anything else about the BDCs. Is it because you will go and get our hard-earned dollar from oil export and so on, and go and sell it to somebody called BDC at a very low rate, or somebody called a big, I don't want to call some names, a government agency or whatever, give them that same dollar at low rate, when the actual rate is somewhere higher in the private market? You must breed round-tripping and corruption. You can't give a rat, your fish to hold for you, and hold a cane to say, don't eat that fish. You're wasting your energy. away from the rat, and everybody will rest. That's my view on this.
All right, interesting. But it's time for us to go for another break now. We'll be right back to have more discussion with our guests. They're still here with us, and the conversation will continue. And that will be after this break. Stay with us.
The Three Wise Men. Iconic sculptures and statues adorn major metropolitan cities of the world. In Lagos, Nigeria, the statue of three men designed to depict the state's cultural heritage and to usher in visitors and tourists into the ever-accommodating center of excellence is no doubt an astounding work of art. Originally built under the administration of Colonel Raji Rasaki, designed by Bodun Shodende in 1991 and standing over 12 feet high, referred to as Agba Meta or Aro Meta, the three sculptured chiefs were placed along the Lagos-Ibadan toll gate to welcome people coming into Lagos State. The statue called the Three Wise Men by many has become a major signature for the state. Three white-capped chiefs clad in white wrappers, knotted across their shoulders and with clenched right fists are shown in the artwork. The images fascinate and create impressions in the minds of visitors coming into the state, captivating the attention of visitors who look with keen interest, pondering on the messages which the posture of the engraved images signifies. The Three Wise Men has been relocated thrice from its original position at Ojodu Berger end of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway to Magodo area before its final relocation to its present site at Olowopopo Drive. The sculpture has suffered severe damages over the years and renovated. Bodun Shodende, through this sculpture, depicted the highest honor that can be afforded to anyone in the Eko greeting tradition. The Three Wise Men, Arometa, Souq, Enlightenment.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, if you're just joining us, you're at the right place at the right time. We got you covered. We're still looking at some of the economic decisions made by President Bola Tinubu, some of these reforms and the impact. Like a report suggesting that these policies are paying off. When you talk about the overseas remittances, according to figure released by the CBN for February, it has increased to $1.3 billion. Let's still get back to our guest. He's still here with us. We still have Mr. Oju here with us. Glad to know you're still there with us.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great. Now, let's look at some of the decisions made by the president, talking about some of the economic policies and reforms. The major out of this policy has to be the removal of first subsidy. I know this is overflogged, but where I'm heading is, will you say that Nigerians are enjoying the benefits of the removal of this subsidy? What do you think is playing out, and what can be done differently to let Nigeria feel the impact of the removal of this subsidy?
Yeah, the fuel subsidy removal was a necessary evil, an important surgery that needed to be done to free up government's revenue for proper expenditure on the economy. However, like I mentioned earlier, it was rather done carelessly. True, even though the government has not admitted it, but I think that statement made by our dear president on the day of inauguration was rather reckless and careless. And that's why they threw themselves into that trouble early on in the administration. The removal was, even though it had been planned earlier before he took over, but he would have given himself a month or two to put some measures in place to ensure that the announcement of the removal will not cause the kind of uprising it did cause when it was carelessly announced and now forcefully implemented through as they took over. That was a big distraction on the government. So I think it would have been done a lot better. And as they were doing it too, they were also doing the FX reform at the same time. No proper gap to time them and manage them. That's why over the past 1 year, we have seen goods and services doubling or tripling in prices. So timing was a major issue on this policy. Otherwise, fuel subsidy removal was becoming very, very necessary for Nigeria to survive. Even though I've also commented that removing fuel subsidy without cutting down the cost of government is just making people to suffer and suffer and suffer, without government taking any adjustment on their own part. Government will always demand for Nigerians to tighten their belt in adjustment for fiscal challenges. But the same government will go around with their largesse and bogus spending on different fronts. That's the problem we have seen in our reforms. Government is not reforming to stay leaner and less costly and more efficient. Thank God that we're now moving to it, with the announcement of the intention to implement the long-standing Oronsaya report that's trying to merge or scrap or realign a number of government parastatals and agencies. It's only when that kind of fiscal adjustment is done that the benefit of fuel subsidy can be realized by Nigerians. Otherwise, it is just robbing Peter to pay Paul.
All right. Now that you've mentioned the implementation of the 2012 Oronsaya report, for which the government has set up an 11-member committee to have that happen, what are your expectations?
Well, I have some concern. When I read the members of the committee, I found that they were all career civil servants and then political appointees and so on. Of course, some statutory positions like the Attorney General of the Federation, the Secretary of the Government of Federation, and a few personal assistants here and there, making up the 10-man or 11-man committee. I felt a bit disappointed, even though it's within the rights of the president to decide who belongs to the committee or not. I'd expected that one or two members of that committee, as they were constituted in 2012, would have made this current committee. And at least one technocrat, there are, we have enough of that. I don't want to call names here. From each region of this country would have been made part of that committee, so that they will just think outside the box, not like normal government way of thinking. My fear is that that committee should not just go and bring out another white paper to be studied and dropped like they did under Buhari's government. Are we expecting implementation, or are we expecting another paper, white paper, that will now become another issue for argument, and then we just go down the drain that way again, and nothing is done? So what I expect is that this committee should be a bit more forceful, not just to write on paper, but to begin to implement. even though I understand that their mandate is to, look at all the legislative adjustments that need to be done, constitutional amendments, and so on, and propose them. So it may not be an immediate thing, but I don't want the process to be so long that in between we lose the drive and the zeal to implement that, that report. So I don't want us to be having second white paper, third white paper, and so on and so forth, and the whole thing ends up again in the dustbins. We need to see government pushing through policies through this committee to ensure that those institutions that are meant to be merged, the merging process starts immediately. Let the lawyers begin their fireworks and so on. Let the constitutional amendment legislators, senators and House of Rep people begin to do the work that needs to be done for those agencies that are in the Constitution, to amend them to be able to accommodate the new situation, the new mandates and so on. So I expect to see practical work being done, not another committee discussion, drinking tea, and writing another report again. At the end of the day, we end up with additional reports, and nothing is done on ground. Like I've mentioned, we need to see the agencies that are meant to be scrapped. The ones that are meant to be merged within the next, few months. The ones that are meant to be, put under some other ministries. We see that happen, and then the manpower are properly redeployed. And like I said earlier, government can even begin to put incentive now in those agencies that are meant to be scrapped for those who want to voluntarily retire, to get away with some money, retire, and then run their own personal lives. So this time around, we expect action, not committee meeting again that will come up with another white paper report and then nothing happens.
All right. According to the speculation by some of the experts who are looking into this, there's this insinuation that this might lead to loss of jobs, especially for the heads of these agencies. Do you see this coming, and how can this be managed? Then on the other hand, the committee has been given 12 weeks to deliver this white paper. Do you think the time frame is enough to do this?
So that's my concern again about white paper, bringing up white paper upon white paper. How many white papers do we need to get this report, executed? We should be tired of white papers because, they don't give us we don't get anything from these papers. Let's come out with action steps. Even though I know that civil service language will always remain the same. But we expect this committee to come out with action steps. Week 1, this is what we'll do, like a project management, method. What do we do in week 1, week 2? Beginning from when do we begin to implement this? And then for each agency, we get the consultants that will help the government pull through all these, all the new mandate adjustments. I expect that to be, practical. That's why I said this committee would not have been, made up of only government workers and career politicians. Government would have looked at a few private sector-driven agencies and picked 1 or 2, resource persons, consultants, technocrats to join this committee to get them begin to put actions behind all the white paper and so on. In terms of job loss, clearly, Nigerian government, is carrying much more, staff strength than it can manage. And like I said, the labor people will always say we don't want to lose have people lose their jobs. Way to reduce their staff strength. To slow, because that's the whole idea of this whole thing. If at the end of the day you finish it and you don't have some reduction in your salary spend, wages, expenditure, and so on, then we haven't achieved much. So there must be a situation where people can be reallocated to do other things, and people can be empowered and encouraged to drop out of the boat. If a boat is sinking and you want to save the boat, you don't find a way to put people in different parts of the boat again. There are some who must have to exit. It might be painful for government more than for those who are living. Government should find a way to exhibit people, without much pain on the citizens. And I dwelt on that in my last interview. I've said government should find a way to incentivize people who want to resign, voluntary resignation, and then start their own thing. Train them, develop their capacity, reduce their fears by giving them some important tools and skills they need before they leave. And then, if possible, give them some extra money beyond their gratuity to enable them to start their own enterprises. And in doing that, you will even not just reduce the cost of government or governance, you also improve entrepreneurship. Some of them will become exporters, some of them will become farmers, helping to solve our food crisis and so on. But the important thing is that manpower that were otherwise redundant or locked up in federal agencies are now released to become productive in the economy. So if done properly and innovatively, what would have been a disadvantage or a negative in this process can turn to positive for Nigerians. It's all about marrying public sector thinking with private sector efficiency in the whole process. And that's why I suggest that government should look at bringing a few private sector energy or interest into the committee to enable them work more pragmatically. Thank you.
Efficiency, and as you suggested, that the private sector should be brought into this committee, or at least representatives from the private sector. Let's look at one aspect that perhaps wasn't considered in the report, which is privatization of some of these agencies and parastatals. Instead of scrapping some of them, as you've agreed that there might be some level of job loss, would it be good to privatize some of this, would it be feasible rather, to privatize some of these agencies rather than scrap them, to make use of the redundant manpower?
Well, privatizing an agency will always be very useful if the agency's mandate or activities are privatizable. Let me use that word. What sector do they belong to? How commercial can their business become? So is it a viable business that can be given to the private sector to run? Otherwise, that would be a big issue. For example, you have an agency for handling refugees, maybe being merged with the one dealing with border issues. So you find that you can't privatize a border control agency. You can only remain a public sector agency. Maybe merge them if they're doing the same thing. Refugee management is not a private business that somebody can handle, for example. The Bureau for Public Enterprise being merged with another, those are government, natural government or civil service entities. So there's nothing private about their business that you can give it to an individual to run. Okay, agencies like, let's say, NIWA, National Inland Waterways Agency, is the kind of thing you can privatize if there's need for that. Because when they manage our waters, they can make money out of it. You can be a private enterprise making money and paying government more tax and so on. NNPC, for example, and other business-driven agencies can be privatized. But from the list of these agencies that you see that government is trying to adjust their mandate, you find that most of them are usually public-related agencies whose businesses are not, likely to become private concerns, in my own view. Whether it's Pilgrims Board and so on and so forth, these are, maybe trying to pick an agency and merge under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and so on. These are things that government must do to run the economy. So, where there's private concerns or private interests or business that's viable, of course, privatizing them or commercializing them is always a good option. But in this case, I see a government trying to streamline government agencies, government activities under limited umbrellas instead of multiplying or duplicating their functions. That's what I see happening here.
Thank you very much for spending time with us today on Early Exchange and looking at the Oronsaye report and the committee that also has been set up by the Tinubu-led administration to implement that report. We thank you very much, Oji Chigozie Udemezue, who is Managing Consultant and CEO of Flame Academy of Consulting Limited.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me here, and I hope we meet again soon. Have a blessed day.
It's a wrap on the show today. Many thanks for being with us from 8 a.m. until this time. Let's do it again tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. I am Blessing Aitches. Stay with Souq News. You enjoy many programs from Souq News and have yourself a beautiful day.
And from me to you, be wary of the decisions you make every day, because decisions, they are like bricks that form the future. Your future is determined by the decisions you make today. Don't forget, the conversation continues on our social media platform. An Early Exchange returns tomorrow. I am Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.